the clouds. So fantastic. Okay, so welcome along. Sam's just joining us. Loads as usual to go through, and if with a bit of a heavy heart, if I'm absolutely honest, this is the seventh and final masterclass in the series, and I've really enjoyed this one. So, I've really enjoyed most of them, but it's been a great cohort, and this would be my. We'll do the obvious social media shot towards the end. Demiji, can you try and remind me to do that? Because you know what I'm like. If we can kind of do that afterwards, if that's okay, brilliant. Let's sort of crack on. So we have talked about all sorts of things throughout this masterclass series, and the material itself is one thing, but actually the conversations that happen between all of us as a result of what the material that goes up, that is for me the biggest win of all. So just kind of bear that in mind. Please don't let up today. Going back to the end of last week, as we always try and do, which is the takeaways that we took away from negotiate and close. It's a natural conclusion. Closing is a natural conclusion to a well-qualified sale with a client that we want to onboard. In other words, we're creating willing buyers of our product and service. Okay, so there's none of this strong arming, half Nelson over the desk or anything like that, like sales used to be perhaps 20, 30 years ago. It's much more nuanced, much more sophisticated, and in fact, really powerful selling is where they're actually taking the product out of your hand rather than you kind of necessarily shoving it down their throat. Okay, so, and remember from negotiation, if you've proved your value, if you've sold the value of your product or service, and you've fought your position, defended your position in terms of negotiation and making them feel like they have a good deal. And we talked about the example of buying a car off the forecourt and making a rude offer and it being accepted, and all of that ensues. And in other words, we have to create the illusion, if you like, the feeling that a good deal has been brought about for all parties. Rule number one, ask for the business. Many different ways of doing it. And then maybe a test close. How does that sound? Any questions? Is it okay in blue? Something like that. And then remember that over and above all of that, that one thing worse than no business is bad business. I know we've heard that a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, ever since, frankly, Brexit came on the table, but the rule is still good. Conditionality, trading positions. If I can do this, will you do that? Always making sure you get something in return for the concession that you've made, training the other side. And then silence, the ability of using silence in our communications. And a perfect example of that would be if you've seen the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks, made in the last year or two, or released in the last year or two. There is a fantastic sequence in there in a diner where there's over a minute of absolute silence in the scene. That's very, very unusual, certainly on the big screen. And being your authentic self, using words that you're comfortable with, whatever level that might be, but also that the other side will relate to. And then the notion of we have a deal, agreement, acceptance, and remembering to thank them all afterwards for their business, something we need much more of in business and society these days. Okay, brilliant. So carrying on to today and maximizing yield from existing customers. Just a reminder, we've been through value proposition number one, go-to-market strategy, lead generation, the right kind of leads though, we don't want the wrong kind of leads, qualifying those opportunities, asking questions, identifying their real needs. And then if it's a larger or a strategic opportunity, we're going to have a pursuit strategy. negotiate and close. Again, in the same phase, because sometimes we have to go from one to the next almost seamlessly, and then back again if we need to. And then today, maximizing maximizing yield. There's another name for maximizing yield from existing customers, and you may hear of it being referred to as wallet share or share of wallet. So if someone's spending £100,000 a year on their cyber software, but you're only getting £20,000 a year for the from that, then who are they giving the rest to, and how can you get some of that? And similarly, if you're designing interiors for your developers, you might be leaving money on the table for whatever reason that might be. Perhaps you haven't sold the full amount of service. Maybe there's more that you can sell. So understanding budget and how the client's budgets are allocated and proportioned is a really important part of understanding your client's business and whether you're maximizing that business or not. So the total size of the prize, if you like. So attracting more spend, selling more stuff. And often that can be so much more than just cash. There are ways that we can work closer with our customers other than just for pure cash. The assumption, of course, is that the relationship is actually capable of being expanded. We've got a good reputation with the customer. And it's a really good test of a customer relationship with, are they willing to spend more money with you? You know, it's a pretty simple test. And frankly, it can be a really sobering experience asking the customer what they think of the service that your organization is delivering. It can be enlightening, it can be sober, it can sometimes be chastening, but what's really important is that there's no surprises, and that if they're experiencing poor service, that you fix it, and B, you understand what's behind that poor service, why that's happened, what it was going to take to fix it. And the customer agrees that you're delivering great service. Okay. So why is that important? Well, it's really important because it costs between 5 and 25 times as much to win a new piece of business as it does to win business from an existing client. And that's official data from the Harvard Business Review. Okay, 5-6 years ago. But it's going to be just as true. The theme is it's more expensive to win new business. And yet, especially IT companies, Dimitri, I'm not expecting you to answer this, but IT companies are famous for sell it and move on. And that's the way they incentivize their sales forces. And they almost hand over customer account management to customer service, which is okay if you've got a well-trained customer service that can upsell and is really comfortable in doing that process. But many times people are plunged into the customer service seat without really any training or of any kind, and therefore you're in the lap of the gods really as to whether that's going to become a success or not. So the important theme is now the mobile phone industry, and I've worked not for, but I've worked with the telecoms industry. Well, I started out with BT, so that's how long I've been in the telecoms industry. 30, oh my God, yeah, let's not go there, 38 years. So a couple of Coke cans and a bit of string, I think we had when I started out. But anyway, the mobile phone industry, just a quick show of hands, has anyone actually changed their mobile phone contract provider in the last 12 to 24 months? Has anyone actually changed? So one, no, and some of you will be on corporate, so it's less likely to do something there. Okay, so one of you, so they have something just once. Okay, Sam, thank you. So that's 2 out of, so 25%. Now, there's like we said before in previous masterclasses, you've got to speak the language that your customer speaks as well. So the telecoms industry is no different to the charitable industry, the financial services or technology. They all have their own language. And one of the big words, the big metrics in the telecoms industry is churn, C-H-U-R-N. It's up on the screen, churn. And this is basically the definition of running to stand still. So the mobile phone industry, the last numbers I looked at, they have a churn of something like 36%, which means for every 100 customers they've got, they're going to lose 36. They're going to go on to another deal with O2, Vodafone, whatever it happens to be. And they're going to, so they've got to get 37 customers in to grow, and all they've done is grown by 1%. Even if they sell develop 37% more customers, because they've lost 36 out the bottom. So they're running just to stand still. They're not really looking at, it's very easy to change your mobile phone contract. On the day that you have to do it, you may think it's not very easy with a pack number and all of that, but actually it's very much easier to do that. Okay, right, what's next? There you go. 36%. So energy industry is the other. So I've worked with the energy industry on occasion as well, working with their call centers. So apologies if you've had a call from any of them the last 6 months, but they have the opposite problem, even though there's 200 players in the market. And the Competition and Markets Authority have been thinking about the energy industry for years, trying to encourage people to change contracts because people are spending too much money on their energy unnecessarily. And they have something like 2 to 3% churn, and no one can figure it out. Some of the leading academics in this area think that it's such a boring subject, electricity and gas, that people just can't be bothered. Okay, so it cost me £5 a month, £10 a month extra. It's just unexciting. Whereas getting a new mobile phone, especially if you're like me, that can be, I must revisit my life, but that could be, anyway, that could be one of the highlights of the year for you if you've got, the latest iPhone or Samsung or whatever it is. If you like technology like I do, that can be a really interesting kind of a much more engaged customer or audience around that. So if you have a proposition that people really care about and are really engaged with you, frankly, you've won hearts and minds, then you're onto a winner, and you should be able to at least engage with your customer base. You stand a fighting chance. Okay, right. So Empower, just to drive this point home, we had to make 168,000 sales a year amongst a set number of something like 550 agents, and break that down. So that's the process that we were looking to refine. So that's why closing, negotiating, building rapport on the phone is vitally important. And there will be a point of time in the not too distant future when we're going to be able to meet face to face. But until then, Zoom, phone, that's what we need to be brilliant at. Okay, right, some more facts and figures then. So customers switch suppliers for a number of different reasons. Excuse me. So, and if you make it too hard for your customers, perhaps you've not invested in your website, perhaps you've not invested in your IT systems, whatever it happens to be, then that's going to cause your customer some aggravation. And if there's too much of that, they will simply get bored and they'll move on to someone else, especially if you've got a product or a service which is what I would call not very sticky. If you're selling a service, especially something complex like a security service, although it's hard to sell, it's quite hard to unseat at the same time. If you're providing an annual subscription towards your child development platform, Joseph, that's also what I would call a sticky solution. It's quite hard to unseat. That does not give you any room for complacency or any cause for complacency, but it's quite hard to unseat that. There are notice periods and all of that, but those are all things that can cause you to engage more with your customer set. Okay, so the example of that was that Blockbuster had a technology, and actually maybe not everyone is remembering of Blockbuster, but in the days when we had VCRs and all of that, the technology changed, not overnight, but they didn't see it coming. They refused to change with the market, and now they're a distant memory. And something like 89% of people get frustrated because they have to repeat their issues. So if you've got customer service going on in your organization, then it needs to be absolutely seamless. And if you're having to hand over a customer complaint to another person, for whatever reason, you're going from finance to another subject matter, it's got to be seamless. You don't want the customer repeating their story over and over again, because that's, something like 90% of people will eventually give up, or they'll punish you at the time their contract comes up. Okay, so we've been through those numbers. Okay, right. So you'll recognize this pyramid because it comes in on almost every session now. This is a value stack, and we've talked about relationships, those commoditized transactional relationships that I've already talked about, and I just want to give you kind of examples of those where we're going. So I've talked about donor-recipient relationships. Those are very transactional, not very sticky. Buy today, gone tomorrow. All of that. Rising up to the very top, which is where you guys want to be with the value add, the trusted advisor status, and the notion of tips, which we've talked about before, trends, implications, possibilities, solutions. These are all factors that are going on in the marketplace that you have zero control over, but may be affecting either your client's business or your business, or both, actually. And COVID is one of those examples. Brexit, COVID affects absolutely everyone. Brexit affected most, I would say. There are a number of businesses or charitable organisations that are solely focused on the UK, and Brexit doesn't really affect, or may not have affected, although some organisations found out that in their supply chain, actually they were supplied from EU nations, and therefore it crept up and bit them on the backside. So those are all stuff that you have no control over, but you have to be aware of and adapt as necessary. And then something I'm not going to spend any time on, other than the concept of a net promoter score. Has anyone come across that term before, net promoter score? Okay, so you can Google this offline. Okay, so Google this offline by all means, a net promoter score, and it's a measure, an accepted measure of the likelihood of your customer base to buy from you again or recommend you to others. It's called a net promoter score, NPS. And it's got a range of -100, where you're in big trouble, to +100, where you can walk on the water on your way to church. And if you're above 50, you're in a good place. And that's a measure of, I think, you get more value for your company. If anyone's thinking about exit strategies out there, you'll get more for your company if you've got a really engaged and an invested customer base. So that's a really important point. Okay, brilliant. So quick quiz if we can, and by all means shout out the answer, unless you, Sam, you want to put it in the chat and I'll watch the chat box. But can you give me where do you think an energy provider might be on that value stack? Are they one down the bottom, or are they in the middle or up the top?
Down the bottom, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. They don't even have to think about it. It's commoditized, it's boring, it's not very sticky, it's right down the bottom. They're one-trick ponies, that's all they sell. And let's hope, for their sake, that they're good at it. What about a mobile phone provider or your broadband provider? Where do you think they might be? Okay, I reckon they're in the middle. Okay, and now some of them, it's a really mixed bag. Actually, when you go into that world, it is a genuinely a mixed bag. Some of them are, I can't even think of a polite word, but they're down the bottom anyway. So they'll be very commoditized, very transactional. You'll never hear from them again until the day before your contract expires, and then there'll be all sweetness and light. Do you want to spend some more money with us? And all the rest of that. Some of them will be all right, actually, to be fair. We are, and this is not an ad for PlusNet, but we're with PlusNet, and they sell their customer service quite heavily. Albeit, as you know, in the city of York, where broadband, because of the nature of York and its history, the broadband here is about as ancient as the city itself. So there's just certain things you just can't do. It's one of those things that affects the market. You have zero control over is digging up the ground in the city of York is just very, very difficult. And then some of them, the really value added, perhaps Hewlett Packard, HP, whom I've worked for in my career, depending on which bit you engage with, some of those people will be right up the top. They'll be trusted, they'll be consultative, they'll exhibit all of those behaviors. And that's frankly where I'm trying to get you guys to over this process, is to get yourself out of commoditized, which most people are in and they don't know they're in, up to that trusted. And as your careers progress, I really hope you'll remember the top of that Zeeman pyramid, as it's called, to be in that trusted advisor slot. Right. Okay. So anyway, I really hope, I'm not going to get anyone to, but I really hope your GP is in that trusted advisor. I have to say, it's not a foregone conclusion. It can be mixed based on what postcode that you're in, but your GP, I hope, would be an example of a trusted advisor. If anything's wrong with your health, you should be able to feel like you can go to your GP. And maybe when you become a really successful consultative salesperson, if anything goes wrong in the world of IT, I'm going to phone Demiji, and that's because even if Demiji doesn't sell it, he maybe will partner with a company because I really trust Demiji. He's really been really beneficial to my career over the last, say, 10 years. And I'm going to invest with Demiji because that's a known deal. Sorry, Demiji, you got the hand up. You haven't known me 10 years. Yeah, I know that. I was just giving you an example.
No, I know. I was just thinking, would a mechanic be in a trusted be in the top spot, the trusted part as well? A mechanic?
Mechanic. Well, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you wouldn't want for your LaFerrari that's in the garage, you wouldn't take that to just anyone. You'd want to trust the person that you were taking that to. Is that a fair example? I think it's a really fair example.
Oh yeah, I was mainly thinking about safety wise. So you wouldn't take your car to a not certified mechanic just in case they can't get the car roadworthy or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're talking about an MOT, so it's got to be
yeah.
standard. So now that's not necessarily trust. That is probably getting onto an accreditation. So a professional standard, again, bit of a mixed bag for anyone that's had to get a car MOT'd, but you're in the right ballpark. And I can tell you, Dimitri, over 30 years of owning some fairly nice cars and some not so nice cars, if you can find a so-called specialist mechanic that looks after, should we say, heavy metal, and you trust them, stick by them. They are absolutely, like a really good plumber, they're worth their weight in gold, those kind of people. Now, mischievously, Joseph has quite, there are always exceptions to every story. So when we talk about trust your GP, Harold Shipman comes to mind, and And that is why, and I know you kind of mentioned that sort of out of jest, but actually, yeah, would you bet your mortgage on, which is your life, on just anyone? No, you shouldn't. So you should never have. And I remember going through a recruitment process actually for HP, and they put you through one of these psychometric tests, and I got a phone call before the job offer. I got a phone call from who was the chap who was going to be my line manager, and he said, "I just want to draw your attention to one aspect of this. You trust everyone at face value." That was their comment to me. You trust everyone at face value. And do you know what? I've not changed an awful lot since then. I am quite trusting of just anyone. Quite a compliant person. That's just my nature. But it was impressed upon me that you shouldn't trust just anyone, because your career may be dependent on someone that you've got misplaced trust in. So it's always just hold back just a little bit and don't accept things at face value. It's a really important life lesson. Thank you for that, Joseph. Okay, brilliant. And bring in a gift. We've already talked about that. Okay, so why bother? So avoid those donor-recipient relationships. They're commoditized. It can get you in the door, and then there's an opportunity to build. So remember, we talked about, should you sell them what they want to buy or what they actually need? And there's always a 50-50 split on that one. For me, I come down on the side of actually get the opportunity to start that relationship, sell them what they want to buy there and then, which may be short-termism, but actually it gives you the opportunity to go back and start building and creating value for yourself and your client, and building a longer term relationship. And I came down on that side. Okay, so getting ourselves to strategic adventure. We've talked, you need sales champions. Sales champions will make your life, your careers so much easier. And the relationship is much more equitable. So rather than the buyer almost being God and you being down here, little old you becoming a trusted advisor puts you on a much more equal footing, and you're just as valuable to them as they are to you, because you trust each other. There's a form of communication, and you can just get the job done. And there's not to say it's easy, but there's a huge amount of trust in place. You can wait a whole career lifetime for one of those relationships to come by, but they're worth their weight in gold, and they're worth investing in. Okay, you become difficult to unseat because of who you know in that account. I remember working with an investment bank some years ago, and a new hire to that investment bank, a guy called Gerard, I was supposed to be having a meeting with, and he couldn't get a meeting room. So he was new to the firm, and there's a couple of thousand people at that time at Canary Wharf. He said, "I'm really sorry, I couldn't get a meeting room for our meeting next Thursday. Let's just meet for a cup of coffee in the canteen." And I needed to have a fairly discreet conversation with Gerard around some pricing issues that we were having. So I really needed a conference room. So I phoned up, excuse me, I phoned up the corporate services help desk, told them who I was, who I worked for, who I reported to, and said, "I really need a meeting room." And they got me a meeting room. And Gerard could not believe that I was able to get a meeting room as an outside vendor versus him as an employee. He couldn't get a meeting room. Now, I tell you that because I didn't have to wave that in Gerard's face. I wasn't big and arrogant or egotistical or anything like that. I was genuinely trying to help, was helping me, but also helping him. But also he knew that I was connected, and so he would have found that difficult to unseat me in that account, knowing that I was well connected with, because I've been around there an awful long time, and I had invested time and effort and the company's cash in in relationships in that account. Okay, brilliant. So you become difficult to unseat as well as a person. Customer lifetime value. Okay, right. Not going to go into that today. Right. So now I want to talk about different kinds of customer. Actually, just before I go into that, is everyone okay? Because I've been speaking just half an hour now. We're all relaxed. We're all okay to go. Fantastic. All right. So I want to go into customer, different kinds of customer relationships. We talked about value stacks, but I now want to talk about not lateral flow, but I want to talk about lateral relationships. So on your screen, you can see 3 portrait style boxes, you on the left, your customer, an example customer of yours in the middle, excuse me, and your customer's customer on the right hand side. So I'm just thinking of an example like this. Let's say I was providing some technology, let's say, to a local authority, a council. Now, if you imagine the value stack, we're right down the bottom. I'm just going to sell them a few laptops, whatever it happens to be, and then I'm out of there. But if I can sell a service solution that benefits that local authority's, their customers, i.e. the residents of that particular geography, if I can sell something which benefits their customers, perhaps it's a software solution, perhaps it's an e-commerce solution that makes online payments much easier for should we say, the elderly and the vulnerable to transact with the council, rather than having to go down and pay over the counter. All of a sudden they can do a transaction over the phone. Then we make their lives easier. Think of how valuable that makes us to that local authority. Now, I've used a fairly simple example there just to try and get the point across, but the moment you start thinking about what you sell and the benefits that you deliver and how they could in fact impact positively your customer's customer, you're onto a winner there. Then you're thinking really strategically around how you're not only making your numbers by selling to your customer, you're helping your customer make their numbers, which is the amount of reach they've got to their constituent community, and all the other targets that go through that. It's quite an abstract example, and I hope that kind of landed. Feel free to ask questions as we move on. The important point is this is you right the way across. You are, and your thinking and your strategy is embedded right across the piece. You are thinking strategically, and that is a differentiator all of its own if you can get to that level of thinking. And I'm absolutely certain that you can. Okay, so maximizing yield first principles. Here's the question: will your customers help you win other clients, become champions on your behalf? Will they provide case studies for you? Or can they co-create content, perhaps a joint press piece in terms of this is Sarah's design. It's so inspired and beautiful, and we're so thankful that we worked with Sarah in terms of her interior design, and actually we've sold everything off plan, and we've achieved more than the asking price for many of our properties. That would be a wonderful place to be. Or there's no one sleeping rough tonight. We've got them all secure accommodation for, that might be the wrong phrase, by the way, but I mean it as what I mean is, they've got a roof over their heads tonight. What a wonderful thing that is to do. And perhaps there's a sort of co-branding opportunity that could come out of that. will they do a video case study? And I've had some done for me over the last couple of years or so, because I can say I'm good or I'm great all I want, and it's frankly tiresome to listen to. But if a third party says that, you know, Keith is good or great, or Joseph is really good or great, that's social proof, and it's just much easier to digest. So here's a point. This is actually true. In fact, my best client hasn't actually spent any money with me for 3 months, and so you're thinking, why is she why is she your best client? Well, I'm talking about customer lifetime value, how much they've spent with me over the last couple of years, I'd say. But she has introduced me to 2 brand new clients that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And so that's why I mean, she's part of my unpaid sales force. And you will have clients in your account base that are like that too. They just like doing business with you. They get you, and they can be that gift that keeps on giving. Will they give you a LinkedIn recommendation, not just an endorsement where you click, you know, Jane's really good at customer service, or Jane's really good at fundraising, but an actual recommendation. A written recommendation. That's really, really useful, not just for your career maybe, but actually for people looking to buy or invest in your organization. They can kind of see that their people are really well perceived, well liked. Will they allow you to use their logo on your website? You have to be really careful with that, but I'm a firm believer in proceed until apprehended. Most of the time they won't know. So, and if you've ever heard that phrase, don't ask an official question unless you want an official answer. So if you were doing business with, let's say, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you said to someone in their procurement department, if I give you this, deliver it early, if I give you a bit of discount, I want to be able to use your logo on my website. The answer is almost certainly no. That is such a huge ask, to ask somebody to go and ask the head of PR and comms if they can use their logo on your website. That, you know, that's an almost, it would be too hard for them to do it, a really big ask. And so just be careful what questions you ask. However, you are not likely, unless you're bringing their brand into disrepute, you're not likely to get into trouble should their logo appear on your website. And I'm not advocating that you're doing that, by the way.
Can I just step in and just say something? Having worked as a designer for quite some time, you mentioned, you know, the guy that owns Sun Microsystems, is that right? You mentioned that a few. Yeah, he served me with a cease and desist about 20 years ago for using a photograph of something that we did for him. So the point wasn't, the company that I worked for had done the signs outside his head office. And we used a photograph of that on the front cover of our catalogue that we sent out. And we actually got issued with a cease and desist and had to pull the covers off about 140,000 catalogues. And I've been aware of 3 other ones in my time since then. So if you do that, it's fine on your website where you've got the
click a button and it's off.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how people can be aware of that. So I would always proceed with a little bit of caution in that regard.
Yeah, it's such a great story. Thank you for that. I am going to make a note. Well, it's on the recording now, but I'm going to make a note of that. I've never come across that before, but I'm really glad you spoke up about that. Interestingly, the point being is that a cease and desist, it's not the end of the world. They're just, and that's legal parlance for please don't do that anymore. You're right. If you've got 140,000 catalogs or whatever it is that you just mentioned, you know, you've gone into some cost, some expense there, and which you can't now use. And so you have got to think about that stuff. But using it on a website, a logo, and you just got to press a button and it disappears, that's a different thing. So well caveated. Joseph, does anyone else have come across similar sort of stories with that before. It's quite a rarity. And I'm trying to think.
So the other people to watch your ordnance survey, people used to scan maps and use maps on flyers. And that was one of the other times where a client of mine got served with a cease and desist for doing that. They're really hot on it. Some people are super hot on that kind of thing.
So it's a good. Now, ordnance survey, I didn't know behaved like that, but I have a client at the moment who is trying to do some business with them, and because they're an undoubted, if their map says something like, yeah, this is boggy ground here, you can pretty much guarantee, you know, it is the case. So they're of such an undoubted nature that they charge through the roof relative to other competitors in their area, in that area. So I am aware of that. Where I'd stop is, so for instance, I'm not going to be upset with Joseph if he uses Sales Marvel's logo on his website. That's not going to worry me. However, if one of my slides, my IP, if you like, appeared on Joseph's website, I'd be more uncomfortable than that, and I hope that's in the bleeding obvious department, but you never quite know. That's my point. To use someone's logo is fine, but to use their IP is not fine. Anyway, but thank you for that. I told you the most interesting conversations are the ones that aren't on screen. They're about our collective experiences. That's the most important thing. Okay, brilliant. So the concept of sales champions, therefore, is your unpaid sales force. And so these three people who did something for me, again, I didn't provide them with a blank sheet of paper. I kind of said, well, I think this is what I've delivered for you. So would you mind talking about these particular things? And also that meant that they didn't have to do an awful lot of thinking. I kind of told them what I'd like them to talk about, and it makes it much easier for them as well. And you might, if you've got three clients in mind that you want to say good things and what things you'd like them to say about you, have that in mind for when you go and approach them. Now, some people won't, but they're unlikely to offer it. You'll have to ask them, and all the rest of it. Okay, right. So remember I said think of three clients. I would now like you to take just 2 minutes to have a look at your screen and think about who would you say are your top 3 clients? What do you currently sell to them? What benefits do you deliver for them? What would they say about you? And that bit in red is a marker for me to tell you something afterwards. What would they say? If you ask them, what do you think of us? What would they say? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like them to do for you? Is it a video? Is it written testimony? If it's written, where would it go? On your website? On your LinkedIn? Would you do a special post about it? And who in that client, a name, would you need to talk to about that? Okay, I'm just going to set the timer at 2 minutes. Right, 5 seconds. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's the dinner bell. Before anyone volunteers, I must tell you a quick story as a cautionary tale. I used to work in the city selling Cisco systems type stuff, and one of their arch rivals at the time was somebody called Bay Networks, ultimately owned by Nortel, who are still around. And I had another Swiss American bank interested in this technology, and this guy called Paul phoned me up, who worked for Bay Networks, and he said, "Have you got a reference client that will for this technology?" And I said, "Yes, speak to, I think, Gordon over at UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland. Go and speak to Gordon over at UBS. And by the way, Demiji, this is 10 years ago. He won't be there anymore, so don't go phoning him up." So so Paul said, he phoned me back about 15 minutes later, and he said, "Okay, have you got someone now that will say good things about your company?" Because I had mistakenly assumed, because this guy was a client and a paying client, paying all his invoices and all the rest of it, and I did not have my finger on the pulse, I presumed he was happy, and he would have said, really good things. Yeah, keeps company. We really like them. Da 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 da. Anyway, he didn't. So Paul phoned him up. Now, luckily, the guy was nice enough to say, "I can't give Keith's company a recommendation at this time." So he didn't slate us, but it was a real poke in the eye for me, that a wake-up call, if you like, that actually I was complacent, and shame on me for that. And so the very next thing, when I eventually did get another name for Paul to phone, I made sure I got in front of Gordon, apologized for profusely, and said, "What can I do to help and sort this out?" And I took it upon myself to do that, and Gordon was in a much better place afterwards. So I'm kind of glad I went through that process. It was a real learning point, but it's a cautionary tale at the same time. And of course, now we're in the world of GDPR. You can't go giving people's names and numbers out just like that. There's a different world, and one that, Gordon was comfortable enough with that. So anyway, okay, right. So is anyone happy to volunteer talking? You don't necessarily have to mention client names or company names, but just talk us about how you might have populated that chart. Right.
Just coming from the perspective of a charity, I found it a little bit tricky to fill it out, because I wasn't too sure if you meant a client that I'm trying to get in with, or someone that I already work with.
Whatever comes to mind, Annie.
Can it be either?
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay. So I did it for a current partnership that I manage, who's like one of our biggest partnerships at the hospice. So they're an IT recruitment firm based in the city centre. And then in terms of kind of current benefits that I think that I deliver to them, it's a lot of bespoke partnership management. So coming up with individualised ideas for them for fundraising, coming up with kind of tailored sponsorship opportunities for them. So everything is kind of moulded around their company, what their capacity is, and how they've enjoyed supporting us, rather than just giving them the bog standard, like, here's a fun run, here's like something that you can get involved with. And I think another benefit for them particularly is the recognition that they've achieved from supporting the hospice. So I try and be really, really thankful for the things that they do for us, and they get a lot of social media shout outs. They've received a lot of like postal thank yous and in-person thank yous and video thank yous as well. Hopefully what they'd say about me is that I'm very proactive and positive, quite engaging and professional, and also very efficient. In terms of media that I would use, I think just a mixture would be great. So obviously video is I find video a really good tool at the moment, because obviously there is so much stuff online, but then written as well is also really nice. And in terms of like who I talk to and when, I mainly liaise with the managing director and then their kind of CSR manager on a regular basis. So because they're our top client, it will be the kind of weekly, bi-weekly, or depending on their kind of business demand, it may even be kind of like, I'll touch base with you next month when things have calmed down, that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a mixture really for me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And
I wasn't too sure if I'd done the right thing, so.
not at all. I recognise everyone's business, organisation, charitable organisation, we all have what I call an operating context. So whatever I put up here, it's however you interpret that. At the end of the day, the only thing that's important is for you to be in a better place, for you to be those +2 points that I mentioned at the beginning of this course, although hopefully it's many more than +2 points ahead of the curve. So thank you for volunteering, and that was fantastic information, Abby, and you've been really creative in how you've interpreted that. Anyone else like to come forward with their thoughts?
I'm happy to give one of the three. So I'd say that Doncaster Council are one of my top 3 clients. Current benefits, essentially work in partnership with them to sell some of their products which contain our product inside, but give additional help, like additional marketing. We'll give ongoing support and training that's basically, well, it's not free of charge because it's included in the cost of the package that we provide for them, but we're quite proactive in offering that and making ourselves available. What would they say about you? They'd say that we're a very friendly company. Or do you mean about me personally, or about my organisation?
It was the global you. So
global, yeah. So they say we're a really friendly company, and we're not all about the money. I found out why that was about. We've got like invoices that haven't been paid in about 7 months, and no one's chased them up. That's actually the truth as well. But that's how I ended up in this job, through a contact at Doncaster Council, and that's how they described the company as being friendly and not all about the money. But it meant that they've kept working with us and whatever.
Why not? They're doing it all for free. Why?
Well, they will honour the invoices, but they actually said in choosing someone, because I think public sector is quite uncomfortable with the private sector, and I'm sure it's the same with the third sector or voluntary sector as well. The private sector can be sometimes viewed as being a little bit aggressive or just about the money. So for them, that was quite important, that the company was very much about its vision and not just about making money. And like I said, that's what was actually communicated to me. In regards to what media would we use, I'd like to use video, but at the moment it's sort of written in the form of case studies. I know the name, and I've got the direct contact with the person that I talked to there. So
nice one. Thank you, Joseph. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question, please, Keith?
Okay.
Sorry. You know, the 2 questions, what media would you use?
Yeah.
And also who, you know, the client would you talk to and when? Do we have a better kind of suggestions? For example, is best we talk to the directors, or is it best to talk to someone that can give that authentic kind of testimonial?
Yeah, do you know what? That's a really good question. It's just going to take a couple of seconds to process that a second. Okay, here's my response. My response is, it's a bit facile, but actually that's me. But is if you can wave a magic wand, what would you want that client to say about you? And it will, so for Sarah, it will be, she produces the most magnificent designs. You know, they're inspired. We achieve, greatness comes out of from Sarah's pen. Who in that client would say that about you? And then I'd go to that person. Now the caveat is that person is actually allowed to go on the record to say that about you. You don't want to get a letter from Scott saying cease and desist from asking my staff to say nice things about your company, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like, what would you want them to say? Ideally, you go to anyone that in that client and they'd all say that, but there are some, you know, because everyone's different, some people behave in different ways. So that is the way that I'd approach that. But if you're dealing with smaller developers, I don't know if that's the case for you, Sarah, then there may not be too much choice of who you go to. But also, remember also, this is an opportunity for your client to get some profile as well. It's not a one-way street here. So it's an opportunity for you in many different respects. So if you have what I would call a day-to-day contact that you would like to reward in some way, you know, get them their 15 minutes of fame or whatever that phrase is, then maybe it's an opportunity for you to further embed yourself in that company. And further strengthen your relationship with that company is by kind of joining forces, a co-branded bit of marketing collateral here. Now, Sarah Edwards is biting her tongue here because she might want to say, so you don't have to, Sarah, but you're very welcome to jump in if you want to say something.
No, I was just I was thinking actually a couple of things, and I've had experience when I've been in-house marketing and with my old colleagues, where they would sort of say, oh, so and so's willing to give us a testimonial, and get really excited, and then I'd have to say to them, are they authorized? Because like that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, if they are all, you know, it's great, but actually, do they have the permission? Because otherwise you could end up, they could get in trouble. But I've been doing some case studies recently on for my business, and one of the things that I the approach I've taken is put the person in the story. So, because and again, when I in the past, when I have worked in businesses and they've been big organizations, the case studies are very corporate, you know, they're very, this is what the company does, this is, you know, and actually and sort of I'm used to seeing that, but having done them for myself, actually, somebody said to me, you know, tell the story of the person. Imagine, and actually, so I've got a little boy called Jude, and the chap that was telling me was say, imagine you're telling Jude a story. That's how you should write, you know. If you think about storytelling as in books and things, like you really resonate, like that, you buy into that person and it resonates. So that's the like approach that I've started to take with my case studies for my business, and certainly that's what I'll recommend to clients as well, because I just think it's a really, you know, you need to, that whoever's reading that or watching that video, they need to see themselves in those words and what they hear. So that's something I've been doing. That's the approach I've taken recently.
That's a really good shout. Whenever you do, thank you for that, Sarah. Whenever you do this stuff, you have to think about, what do you want the audience to say, do, or agree as a result of having consumed that content? Do you want to, are you generating awareness? Aren't you a wonderful brand? Do you want leads coming out of it? You know, what is it you want to do? And so tell the story. Yes, humanize it. That's always good. But tell the story with the audience in mind. That I would like to think that's a given, but I'd rather say that and look foolish than not say it, and all of those things. So tell that story with the audience in mind, because you want a particular outcome from that. Brilliant. Thank you for engaging in that so positively. Excuse me. Okay, what's next? What's next is so there are three different types of customer that you can get. Now, the first two you'll get no problem, because it's either existing business or it's new business, right? But there is actually a phrase that that I use, which is, so we get existing logo. That's a very American phrase, but it works for this purpose. Existing logo, and new logo. And the reason I break it down like that is because some of you are going to be, and Demeter, you come to mind for sure, but I'll bet Sarah's got some opportunities in that space as well, and maybe Sam. Okay, I'm going to talk about this from selling to banks, okay, which is something I know about, something about. So NatWest is a standalone brand, but it happens to be owned by RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland. But certainly at the time I was working with them quite heavily, you could do business with NatWest and never meet anyone from Royal Bank of Scotland. Now that may have changed in terms of consolidating platforms and all the rest of it. The point being is that I could do business with NatWest, and I could do business separately with Royal Bank of Scotland, but I could leverage the two. If I was doing business with NatWest and it was going well, I could say, you know, so-and-so from NatWest will say really good things about it. And because they're effectively one company, albeit they're operating autonomously, it would still have some value and some relevance. The person in RBS, Mike at RBS, would phone up John at NatWest and say, what's Keith like? What's his company like? Are they good to deal with? Are they expensive? All those things. So the John that I'm talking about who worked for NatWest is the same John from that story I told you about a couple of sessions ago that said, if you can give me that same price on Monday morning, I've got a deal for you. And that's when he moved to Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, and we were able to do another deal. So we had that relationship. And then John then moved from RBS to a totally separate company. Commerzbank is a German company, standalone. They're massive in Germany, not so massive in London, but they are in London. Nothing at all to do with RBS or NatWest, but because the common theme there was this person, John, that I was dealing with, and I had the relationship and the trust over many years of doing business with that person, I got the phone call when he went to Commerzbank to say, come and talk to us about what you can do for us here. Let me tell you where we're all at. And I can tell you, going back over my career, you may have 5 relationships like that in your sort of career lifetime of people that become, I wouldn't say John ever became a friend necessarily, it wasn't that sort of person, but in terms of a professional working relationship and absolute trust in that he never gave me any flannel. If I wasn't going to get an order, he would also tell me, sorry, Keith, you can't do this because of whatever else is going on in the account. It was just a very straightforward, pragmatic kind of relationship, but one whose career, both sides of the table, and mine and John's, had sort of blossomed, if you like, as we, over many years, 20 years probably, in terms of doing that relationship. And it started out with about a $40,000 software order back in the day, which is, you know, not a lot of money in the software, and ended up with $35 million data center deal over many years. But anyway, it's not about me. This is about relationships and how it's a people thing, not necessarily a logo thing. It's a people thing. Okay, so I've already taken away my lines. Anyway, so my point is, for you and in your professional networks, in your sort of business ecosystems, is there anyone that has moved companies within your professional networks over the last maybe year or two? And have you kept in touch with them? Have you talked to them at their new company? Have you kept in touch? Number one, especially given, you know, pandemic, all of that, to ask, how are you, as a professional kindness. But the second thing is, have they got money to spend with you? You might want to think about how you phrase that next question, but checking in and re-establishing that contact is a really worthwhile exercise to do, and I would really encourage you to reflect on that, maybe offline. Okay, so that was almost a horizontal sort of process around people. Let me just talk, and I know there's some big stuff going on here, and we won't get to the bottom of it, but I do want to talk about this a little bit that's on screen. If you remember that value stack, right down the bottom, we talked about donor-recipient relationships. Very commoditized, very easy to unseat. And you're at the mercy of your competition, and it's generally based on price. That's why it's commoditized. And I don't want to get involved in a price discussion. Do I discount from time to time? Yes, of course I do. If there's someone that I really want on this program, we'll find a way to get them here. That's proof positive, I suppose. But anyway, the levels of customer relationship that you can witness, if you like, is at the very bottom, donor recipient, very commoditized. The next level up is where you're adding some value, and I talked about perhaps your broadband provider or a network provider in the city where you provide some hardware and some software, maybe some consulting. There is a value add. You may also sell through that company, so what's called white labeling, and it may be an opportunity. So, for instance, Dimitri's got some cyber software. He may decide to sell that to Royal Bank of Scotland, but Royal Bank of Scotland, through their relationships with NatWest and all the other banks in the Royal Bank of Scotland group, they may decide to buy Dimitri's software for, let's say, £10, just for a number, Dimitri, don't get a heart attack, but just, but then take that bit of software and offer it out to their other companies for £15. And that would, so you would be selling your software, Dimitri, through RBS into all the other banks and creating, rather than a cost center, you may be creating a profit center, which would mean RBS can hire more people, more consultants, and all the rest of the stuff that goes with that. It's just a different way of thinking about your client relationship. And right there, we've already talked about trusted advisor, where you're the first person that gets the call whenever your client is thinking about doing something new. Even if you don't sell it, they will come after you to get your opinion. Okay, now, even further above that, you may decide that actually this is going so well, we are so well aligned culturally, strategically, all of those things, that actually we're going to form a separate venture. It's called a special purpose vehicle, or a joint venture, and we're actually going to go to market together. And examples of that would include, back in the day, there would have been, well, Everything Everywhere is an example of that. It was, I think, Orange and BT getting together for all their, not for the consumer customers, but for their enterprise. Sorry?
I think, and I was just going to say, I think it was T-Mobile. Thank
you.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, you put me right off now, Dimitri. So T-Mobile, there you go. I did say, I think, thank you for being on the ball, Dimitri. But that's an example of a venture that was going really, really well. So they take it to market. Another example of that, again, in the telecoms world, was a Vodafone Group and a German company called Mannesmann. Massive. They're like the BT of Germany, if anyone knows that market. And it was called a merger, which you generally do for tax reasons. and it was quite some time ago. It was the biggest ever merger in corporate history, something like $200 billion, which you can finance a good movie for these days. But anyway, Vodafone merged all their assets with management. That's a very sort of pinnacle of a business relationship that happens. So my point is, if you position yourself correctly, you can ride the crest of that wave. So if you're selling your technology, like you just said, to T-Mobile, Dimiji, and you're watching, and the first time you'll ever learn about this, by the way, is in the Financial Times. So that's important for you to keep an eye on, is you can ride the crest of that wave. So when they need to buy more of their stuff, more of your stuff to integrate in the new version of the company, you benefit from that because you've been providing that service, but only if you've got a good reputation, only if you're delivering well, and you can ride the crest of that wave. And similarly with Vodafone management, I benefited from that, from having invested my personal time and attention for some years in Vodafone Group, and I rode the crest of that wave. You can do that too. And likewise for your respective businesses, Sarah, you're going to get developers that that collaborate together. And if you've delivered great designs, great service, all the rest of it that goes with that, you will naturally be introduced to those opportunities. And again, those are the relationship gifts that keep on giving. So that's why it's really, really important to take a longer term view on those relationships, assuming they're capable of yielding those kind of results. Okay, some big stuff there. I'm going to pause just for a moment. Does anyone have any questions just at the minute? Jane, you've been ever so quiet. Are you okay? Okay, all right. All right. Okay, right. Client growth, just then. So not something I'm known for, and I've always thought of planning as being, frankly, a bit of a boring activity until somebody actually took the time to go through a strategic account plan with me some time ago. And I think the reason I thought it was boring was because I was trying to escape doing it because I really didn't know how to go about it. But a strategic account plan is vital. Steps of creating a strategic plan. Now, by the way, for you guys in the charitable sector with your corporate partnerships, do you produce account plans of any kind with the corporate relationships that you've got?
Yeah, we do. We'll actually, in the kind of kickoff meeting with a new partner, we'll actually kind of create almost a fundraising calendar for them. So we can kind of get a monthly or bi-monthly note of what they're interested in getting involved with. Yeah. And then independent trackers as well. So each business will have their own tracker where I can kind of make note of like, oh, this money's coming in this month, which was for this activity, etc., and just try and keep track of their income, because we do try and set some kind of reachable goal for a company within the year. Yeah. So whether they're an SME and their target might be £500 for the whole year, or if they're a large business and they want a target of £20,000, it just means that we can kind of keep track as the year progresses. And if you get, say if it's March to March, if you get to Jan and they're about £5,000 off their target, you sit down with them again and say, you really want to hit this, how can we help you achieve that? Like, what do you guys want to get involved with and stuff? And it's really helpful. Yeah,
great news. Great news. Okay, so see if this resonates with anything you're doing, Abby. And I'm very happy to take a challenge, by the way, because I'm always keen to learn how other companies are doing this too. So anyway, basically, there is an as is. Now, if it's a new relationship, the as is pretty clear. There's nothing other than perhaps one or two interesting conversations. So that corporate partnership that you're kicking off, the March to March thing, Abby, is about what they currently buy. Well, nothing, but this is the aspiration. And who is your sponsor? I talked about sponsors in classes number 1 and number 5. You can have a sponsor in your company, someone who's heading that up. Abby, I'm guessing that's you, but a sponsor in the client company that you is your go-to, not your day-to-day contact necessarily, but someone, if you need another door opened, you would have a sponsor in the account who can help you move around that account. They become your advocate, if you like. So that's important to identify. Understanding your customers' objectives, both for their own business, their own entity, but also their goals for your relationship. And hopefully there's a high degree of alignment. You can see that there's some alignment between your goals for the relationship and how that you're helping them achieve their corporate, their global goals, if you like. And we talked about those in 1 of 4 as well. Now, for those of you that saw the Peaky Blinders clip that I unpacked in either the introductory session to the taster session to this, Tommy Shelby did that research on his client. He took a gift to that meeting, not the cash on the table necessarily, but the research that one of his vendors was misbehaving and how he could do such a better job, because after all, the Peaky Blinders are really honest and gov, and we're going to do a great job for you. So he had done that research. He understood his client's need, and he told them something about their business that they didn't already know. That's an example, not real life, but it's an example of what you could be doing, what you could be taking to your client base as well. Other areas that you can look in, by the way, if you're looking for clues, if you've got a new client, is by going to the annual statement that they produce, especially if they're a listed company. Pull it down off the internet. It'll be public. You'll only ever get public domain information, and the chairman will tell you basically what the next 3 to 5 years, what their strategy is going to look like. And I am guessing, by the way, an Ofsted report will be just as interesting for if you're involved in primary or secondary schools. The report of the governors will also shed some insight to that, but whatever body or agency you need to go to get that information is readily available, and with the interweb, it's right at your fingertips. If you just know what buttons to press, you can do all that. Sarah, for your developer relationships, there are varying degrees of which they'll be open and transparent about their plans as well, and you're going to have to depend on your person-to-person relationships on how much they're going to disclose to you. But if you're doing a great job and you're at the heart of their offer, which you are for an interior designer, then they should be really really open about where you can go with that relationship. Okay, and then once you understand that strategy, what part of those plans you could play if you choose to, because you don't have to get involved. You've got rights and entitlements in the relationship as well. So if they're going off on a tangent that doesn't suit you at this time, then you don't have to make that journey with them, but don't disappoint them. You know, you may have to decide, actually, we do want to make that journey, even though it's not on our straight plans at the moment. Do you remember I said, I interviewed the guy I interviewed with, Scott, that we just talked about earlier, Joseph, before he issued that cease and desist order to you. When I had my job interview with Scott, he said our strategy is to be tactical. So he wouldn't have known what he was doing in 3 years' time, approximately what he was doing, but because his strategy was to be tactical and actually really embed themselves with client work, they were going to go off and they would go wherever their clients took them. And that's a valid plan. It means that you've got really strong relationships, or they will ensue after time. So he chose to play that game. in the most positive sense of the word. Anyway, right, so what benefits? So if your customer wants to make this journey, what could you contribute? How could you help them get there better, faster, cheaper than either they could do on their own, or if your arch competitor knocked on the door at the same time, how could you, what part could you play in getting them there? And what's the size of the prize? This is, so it's always good to be just a little bit cynical. It keeps you, first of all, it keeps you solvent. And secondly, it keeps you kind of focused on your needs, because again, back to rights and entitlements. So if your customer says, we want to do all this work, which sounds really good on paper, or in a discussion, you might want to 30 seconds, Sarah. So you might want to decide to yourself, actually, do you know what? We're going to end up doing all of this work for only that amount of outcome. It's not worth it. And you have to, because you've got employees, you've got people's mortgages at stake, you've got to be really responsible with your company's resources. So it's a decision that you have to make. Sarah, do you want to mention something? Sarah Edwards.
Yeah, I was just, I've had experience where, you know, like when you've said about what part of the plans that, you know, that they've got and that they want you to, but and that if you choose to,
yeah.
And I've had it, you know, first-hand experience where I've been working with a client, and actually the work just snowballed into something that I didn't sign up for, and you know, and they also probably didn't realize when we started on that project, and actually it got to a point where I had to sort of think, this is not working, you know, and it was a tough sort of call to make, but I had to do it because I was like, this is not happening, this is not what I signed up for. And you know, and actually, I mean, I'm still in good. I've actually just emailed this client today about something. Actually, they're not a client anymore, but I had to sort of say, look, this is not working because of X, Y, Z, and I actually think that you need, you know, A, B, C kind of thing. And they were like, completely get it. And they actually sent me some flowers like after it, because they, you know, they appreciated that honesty and yeah, but you've and I felt better after, because I was like, right, now I can actually put my energies into something I do, you know, can do and want to do, rather than just taking on something that actually is way more than what I thought it was. And so it's tough when it has to happen, but I think when you make those decisions, you can then put your energies into something else that you do want to be part of.
Thank you. That's a really important life lesson, not just a professional sort of career lesson, if you like. Imagine what would have happened, Sarah, and everyone else that was just listening to that, if you hadn't have had that conversation because somehow you were afraid to, because it was going to be full of conflict and you're uncomfortable and all of that. Imagine if you'd have just gone along, the nightmare, the headache that would have ensued. And if you'd have waited 6 months, a year later, your health could have given out. You know, all sorts of negative stuff could have happened, but you bit the bullet and had that conversation with the customer. As difficult as it would have been to have that conversation, the customer will have really respected you for having that conversation up front. And in fact, so much so that if I heard that correctly, they sent you flowers to recognize that must have been, which is, so you must have handled that really, really well. And that's a lesson, frankly, for all of us. And if I may, I haven't got a downer on being British, by the way, but I have to say that you know, sometimes we are a little bit too British. We're a little bit too nice. We sort of tiptoe around having those difficult conversations. And when I worked with Aston Business School last year, I actually had to deliver a tutorial on having difficult conversations. And it's something that we're not very good at and we need to get better at. But that is a subject of a different masterclass. But thank you for making that point. And I'm going to be doing something on this. In fact, I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to do something in about 2 weeks. I'll put an event up on Eventbrite, and I'll start writing the material, because I think it's a really important conversation. Okay, brilliant. So, size of the prize. Do you want to make that journey? Rights and entitlements. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing that story out. And what's the competitive landscape like? So your offer, and this is back to value proposition, if you like, which we did in number 1, your offer relevant to the client, but in the context of your competitive landscape in that account and in that market generally. And who else in that account do you need to be talking to? So more than just your day-to-day contact, but if you want to grow inside that account, who else do you need to be talking to? What other bases do you need to be covering? So for instance, if you're selling IT, let's say, and you're probably speaking to the IT director or the equivalent thereabouts and some of their direct reports, then you might need to talk to, if it's growth, you might need to talk to someone from the business in that organization to talk about how you can support their business growth. Now, your IT people will try and keep you siloed with them. No, Demiji, you mustn't go and talk to them. I only want you to talk to us. We talk to the business. You're going to come across that all the time, particularly with technology. You've got to try and have that difficult conversation about going to talk to the business, and because the more you understand about that client, the better you'll be able to serve them. That's the point. That's a whole other subject, but it's important to get that point across. Pursuit and close strategy, that all comes out of who we're going to talk to, how we're going to go about things, and the size of the prize, etc. Okay, right. So now I want to talk to you about a concept called adjacency. Just let me have a slurp, if you would. Has anyone come across that term before, by the way, adjacency? Okay, right. So imagine you are selling your interior design services to the developer, and we'll call that contract 1. And you decide, I really like this relationship. I think I could do a whole lot more for this client, but scratching your head, what are you going to sell them? And you go through that reflection process. Or you're a charity and we've got one contract with one particular office, DLA Piper or Pinson Masons or whomever it happens to be. But what about if we want to go to another office, another of their offices, and tell them about all the good work that we do for them? It's that kind of conversation. Growing the wallet share, this is what this session is all about. So think about things in those terms. Now, let's say you're a website developer. A website developer, you've got a good relationship, you're taking money from them, and your next step for that client might be, how do we get more money out of them? Might be paid ads. So Facebook, pay-per-click, whatever it happens to be, that would be the next step up the value chain for that account. Okay, what else can we do? Well, the next step might be SEO. That's a natural next step. It's in your world. You would expect someone developing a website to know something about Facebook and pay-per-click. God, I hope so. And then you'd expect them to know a bit about search engine optimization. It's not a huge leap. So we're not going from, I've designed you a website, let me design you a multi-million-pound apartment. That yeah, that kind of doesn't make sense. I hope that doesn't make sense to anyone. Please don't do that. But going from designing a website to paid ads to SEO, I can see that progression. The next, now, but I can also see that growing into brand. And the reason I can see that growing into brand is because your company probably has two personas, has an online persona, and it has, should we say, a real world and in-life persona. Hopefully, they're strikingly similar. But I think if you're good enough and you're informed enough and experienced enough, you could go through that sort of growth curve, so that contract one is your website, you grow into paid ads, SEO, and that way you can go from £10 a year of client revenue to, I don't know, £100 a year. You could grow a lot beyond that. The second example I've got is if you are, Sarah, an interior designer, then what would the logical next, now I'm not an interior designer, so forgive me if step 2 is wrong, but it feels, you know, relatively sensible to me. So you could go from an interior designer, you could say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll design you a garden as well, exterior design, external design. That feels like it could be a sensible next step. Okay, well, what next? Well, okay, well, maybe that stuff that I've designed you, maybe you can actually buy all the products through me. And that way, it's not just a time for money thing. Maybe you can buy all those things through me, and it's not going to take any more of my time. I'm going to set up an e-commerce part of my, as part of my website platform, and we can grow that relationship without actually spending too much more time together. So that might be the next thing. And then maybe, heaven forbid, you can start delivering masterclasses to your tribe, and you can talk about how you design stuff, how you feel about stuff, and it becomes almost a philosophical exercise, then the world according to Sarah. That might be a great progression, if you like. Now, Joseph, Abby, Sam, you will have equivalents in your worlds, and it might be not necessarily products, but it might be corporate relationships. So you've got a relationship with one set of lawyers. Maybe you can go to the professional body of lawyers for the UK, the Law Society it would be. And maybe there's something that you can do there, provided there's some alignment and resonance between the offers. That's just off the top of my head. But there is a way to reflect on this stuff and come out with sensible growth strategies that make sense. Okay. I'm going to whiz on, if that's okay, because I'm conscious we've got 23 minutes left, because I really want to get this concept sort of driven home. Now, we'll send this this chart out separately if you want it. It's a way of thinking about your business world, if you like, the world according to Birmingham Children's Hospice, the world according to St Basil's, or Create Development. And if there's you and your organization at the very center of this chart, you are going to have some market dynamics. I know we've touched on this before. You're going to have a set of customers, people that are where you're getting your deriving revenue from. You're going to have a supply chain, or a value chain, as it's often referred to now. And then you're going to have your professional network, perhaps your followers on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever that might be. But I can tell you now, excuse me, I don't spend a single penny of money outside of those 4 quadrants. And the reason being is return on investment. So if the only exception to that would ever be if I wanted to buy something that nobody else could offer from those 4 quadrants. And I can't even think of an example that would be. And the reason being is because I want a return on that investment, not just for the 100 quid that I spent with, I don't know, my data center hosting company, let's say, I want to, so I spend, if anyone's got a business bank account, which I'm sure you all have, you better believe my bank, Barclays, by the way, who are actually pretty good at this, you better believe I go and tap them up for leads. I go and talk to my bank manager, which is online now, and it has been for years. I go and talk to them about, this is what I do. You make money. The more I turn over, the more money you make, the more products you can offer me. So I go and I leverage that relationship. That's what I mean by your business ecosystem. So my customers, and hence sort of gently asking, I hope gently asking over the last couple of weeks to fill in a survey about how I can make this better, to provide a LinkedIn recommendation. And although Barry's not on the call, he's very kind, did something earlier on, excuse me. My market, am I investing in my market, my target audience, which we've already talked about, and my professional network. So it just needs to make sense. That was a bit of a ramble, and this is so contextually specific to each of our own organizations. I hope that point, did that point land? Did you kind of get that concept of your own business ecosystem? And the reason being, I said that, a couple of nodding heads, that's good. The reason I said that is because you will have your own business ecosystem. And it's really worthwhile going through what your ecosystem looks like, perhaps yourself, or with a couple of colleagues for a peer review, and actually looking at where can we get more growth. And by growth, I mean, where can we sell more stuff, or where can we get more donations? And looking back into your ecosystem to look at where to invest your time and effort, it can be really revealing and enlightening. So I wanted to major on that point. Okay, right. Sky, yeah, I'm not going to do that about Sky because we've already talked about that. So thoughts. Account manager or account servant. Okay, so this is possibly a bit brutal. So I hear lots of times, and Dimitri, you may be one of these people, you're an account manager, albeit internally on the phone or internet or whatever. For me, an account manager is someone that should be trying to work their way up the value stack. Someone phones up Dimitri and says, I want to buy this bit of software. If you're really smart, Dimitri, you'll ask questions around, well, why do you want to buy it? What's it for? What's the context? Okay, so you've said you want this, but actually I think you might need that. That's account management, that's consultative behavior. An account servant would say, yes, of course, that'll be £10.50. Send me send me the payment and we'll release you the software key. There's a very big difference between the two different kinds of behaviors. And one of those you'll make 22,000 a year, and the other of those, if you get really good, you'll make 220,000 a year. I'm sorry to be really brutal about numbers, but that's the difference in behaviors is that stark. So one, if you become really good at account managing and become that trusted sort of advisor, it will really pay dividends. If you're an account servant, and some of that will be depending on what your line manager, how they manage you, and of course the terms and conditions of your employment contract. But those are two very different behaviors, and you may want to decide, what behavior do I want? I can assure you the one on the left, the account management role, is, well, personally fulfilling, but it will make you a much better living as well. But with that comes certain responsibilities as well. Sometimes you have to have, should we say, those difficult conversations, which could be a little bit of conflict. Okay, so what do your clients think of you? So you might think, we deliver benefits A, B, and C, but that's just what you think, and you're somewhat second guessing what you're doing for your client. Your client knows much better how dealing with you feels to them, the benefits they get. So, excuse me. So it can be really enlightening saying to Demiji, I think you've got A, B, and C benefits from this masterclass. And Demiji will say, well, actually, I'm not so sure about A, but I do get this other benefit over here. So actually, I get B, C, D. And that can be a really sobering and enlightening conversation. And he may say, actually, I don't get A, B, or C at all, but I do get D, E, and F, if that translates. So it's really important to kind of ask yourself, what do I think I deliver? And actually ask it's called a circular reference, actually. What does the client think of you? And try and get from them what benefits they feel they get from you, and do the two align? Is there any learning that can be derived from that conversation? So ask them. Okay, right. So some further thoughts on building those customer relationships. What can you do, given that we are in a COVID world at the moment? You can't go and see people, not legally, and please don't. So you can phone them. And you know, one of the nicest things you can do for your customers just now is ask them how. Forget the fact that I'm a supplier to you and you're my customer. How are you? How are you doing? Are you coping? Is there, are you doing okay? Is there anything we can kind of do to help your organization at all? Show that you care. And I do think 12 months ago, i.e. pre-lockdown, you'd have got a very different answer to that. But I think, and I'd be interested to know your guys' thoughts, we now live in a world where we need to be kinder, but first of all to ourselves, and certainly to others as well. And I think the world is ready for that kind of change in relationships. So asking someone whether they're okay, how are you, show that you care. I think that's a professional kindness, and I'd personally like to see more of that. And actually, I think you'll derive more benefits from showing that you care. So the other things that you can kind of do is, again, knowing what business they're in and what their goals are. If you come across any articles, maybe on, I'm going to say on LinkedIn, be careful about tagging someone publicly on LinkedIn. Ask yourself the following question: would they be comfortable me tagging them? Because what they might be doing could be confidential. So I would tend to send them a direct message with a link to an article, rather than, because I'm quite a discreet person, rather than publicly tag them up. For me, that's abusing the privilege, if you were a bit strong. But anyway, so if you find an article that's relevant and could help them, send it to them. Show them that you care. Or if they've posted something, then get involved, like, share, comment, get involved, support it. Because if you've got a business relationship with them and you help their relationship go to the next stage, you can be part of that growth as well. So getting involved with them. Take a gift. I've already talked about that. We can't meet face to face, but if you can take some insight into their business, their market, that they won't have derived themselves, even if they know it, they will be impressed the fact that you took the time to bring that to their attention as well, that you're thinking of them. Support them on social media. I've already mentioned that. Again, case studies. We've talked about, would it be video? Could it be a podcast? Could you invite them onto your podcast? That is such a growth activity just now. Could you reference them in a blog? First of all, you should ask their permission if you're going to publicly reference them. But maybe you can get some links to their website and maybe back and forth, so that you're actually building your equity or your relationship with Google at the same time, so you can get lots more out of that. We can't go for coffee, but actually before too long we will be able to go for coffee. So one of the things that I do is I recognize that if you want to meet someone for a cup of coffee, off-site, it's a minimum of an hour. And sometimes that's too much time to ask for. But if you only need 10 minutes of someone's time, then I have found that me going to Cafe Nero or whatever it happens to be, or I prefer going to an independent coffee shop, but taking a cup of coffee to their office, that gives them the control. They're in their office, you can sit down with them and you can genuinely have a 10-minute conversation, leave them with the coffee afterwards, you've done your bit, and they will sincerely appreciate you more. And you've behaved differently to 95% of your competition. So that's another way to stand out. Again, because I'm in Yorkshire, and we in Yorkshire are very frugal with our cash, aren't we, Sarah? I go for breakfast. Number one, people have got more control over the day. Breakfast can be done in an hour and a half, and there's no alcohol, because things can happen when you have alcohol with clients, and it's not always good. And it doesn't eat into the day that much, and also it's generally much lower cost than going out for lunch or dinner afterwards or whatever. So it's a way that you can spend more time, quality time with customers. One of my favorite places to go, even though the service is all over the place, is a place called Home Deli in the center of Birmingham. If you know that, it's opposite the Hotel du Vin. They do the most fantastic French toast and a decent cup of coffee. So when it opens, that's going to be one of the first things I want to do. Okay, so activities, again, we're not there yet, but golf days are always good, provided, no, first of all, you need to really like someone to want to spend 4 or 5 hours going around a golf course with them. Because you need to, most relationships can stand half an hour spent together. Not every relationship can spend, especially if you play golf like me, i.e. poorly, can withstand 4 or 5 hours going around a golf course. But similarly, if there's a chamber event and you're a part of your local chamber, then maybe you could take someone along as a guest. If you've got an interesting speaker for the day, that might be an opportunity. Again, dinner's another opportunity. Again, spending time, avoid alcohol if possible, especially, anyway, let's not go there. But anyway, activities, think about in the mind of the customer, what do they like doing? That's the test I always use. Okay, and also, frankly, don't just talk about your relationship, yours with that client. Tell them about all the other great stuff you're doing as well. For them, that they may not know. If it's a big account, some stuff that you're doing elsewhere in the account, that helps them build up their knowledge of what's going on, and will also impress upon them the fact that you're able to move around. You don't need to get their permission to move around in the account, because you've got a big enough persona to be able to do that all on your own. What you're doing with other clients, bearing in mind you mustn't be indiscreet. You shouldn't give away confidences or anything like that, but you can talk in round terms. You don't even need to name the client, but another law firm maybe, or another bank, we're doing this for them. Just brings your offer to life, if you like. Or especially if you're, well, actually, if you're in the charitable community, you're doing this anyway. But if you're in the corporate world and you're doing stuff in the community, then that may be something that that your client didn't know about. So all the good, the responsible stuff that you're doing, you can bring that to life. It all enriches your brand and how you're perceived. Again, I talked about case study types, social proof, we've talked about that. Referrals, will they refer you? So they may not be buying, but can they refer you to another partner in another law firm that would be really interested in getting involved in what you're doing in the community as well? That's a great opportunity. And the Net Promoter Score, I sort of went across that earlier. Okay, so wallet share, risk, no, I've already talked about that. Okay, so we are into the last 7 minutes, so I'm gonna focus now. So an example of how all that comes together was that I was looking after, when I joined a disaster recovery company, their persona, and I have to say it's a lazy way of going about things, their persona was that they would sign 12-month service agreements. And literally, like I talked about earlier on, they would phone up the day before. Do you know your disaster recovery agreement expires tonight at midnight? Let's just roll it over for another 12 months. Well, I thought that was very short term. So I took the firm into 3-year agreements. That means that we get lots of money up front. It's less intensive administratively. I don't need to worry about them unless it's revenue-wise for another couple of years. And we're not easily replaced if there's a 3-year contract in place. And also you get lots more. You get paid on another dimension of commission. So it's not just the in-year revenue; it's the book revenue that you've done as well. There you introduce the notion of a long haul, longer term relationship becomes more strategic. Then we sold services on top, consulting services, not just an insurance level break fix support type stuff or disaster recovery. You can introduce strategic consulting services on top, so expert level type stuff, workplace services, and also again contract where we talked about 1, 2, 3, and 4. We introduced additional services on top of that, and we took that account from 80,000 a year revenue to 2.5 million a year in revenue, actually not that painlessly, and because of extending beyond 12 months into effectively a 7-year, well, 6-year agreement, it took us to lots and lots of unbooked revenue. And that took the share price from 10, not just that one account, but that kind of behavior extended across all our accounts, took the share price from £2.05 up to £16, because there's lots of unrealized revenue. It's very, very valuable on the stock market, that kind of activity. And they made the front page of the Evening Standard as well. Okay, right. So that was just a growth story, but I've actually done this. Okay, so the wrap up then is be more than just a donor recipient. I've really felt like I've hammered that home. What's your value proposition to that particular client? Adjacency, what else can you sell them? Your strategic customer account plans, ideally agreed with the client, so they agree that yes, that's where we want to go towards. Become that trusted advisor. And who are your sales champions? Okay, right, 1 second. Let's have a quick quiz. And this is it now. Okay, come off of mute then. And if anyone wants to shout the answer out, how long, and I'm going back a couple of months now to when we first started this. So how long should an elevator pitch last?
60 seconds.
Nope.
10 seconds.
Thank you. Who said that? Was that Jane?
That's me. I'm joking.
Okay, you need to wear a different set of jeans, Daviji, if that was you. Okay, right. So, yeah, 8 to 10 seconds, 16 to 20 words for an elevator pitch. Okay, what's the business-to-business social media platform you should be using lots more of?
LinkedIn.
Yep. If you're B2B, if you're only going to use one, LinkedIn. Everything else is secondary, and it'll be, the reason for that will be different for each one of you, but you should absolutely be on posting your point of view, your content on LinkedIn as an absolute minimum. Now, I know that some people are really big on Twitter, and you shouldn't stop whatever you're doing, but you should also seriously consider being on LinkedIn. Okay, what kind of leads do you want more of? So you don't want just any old kind of lead.
Is it qualified leads? Or
Yes.
We redeemed myself from the elevator pitch one now.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So you're back to zero now. Okay. So the right kind of leads, and all of that comes from giving out the right sales messages at the very, very beginning, acquiring the right kind of leads as a result. Okay. And what do we need to do lots of to fully understand a client's requirements?
Research.
Ooh, actually, do you know what? I was going to say there's two answers to this, but actually, Jane, you've just
Listen.
Listen is one of them for sure, but Jane's just proven there's three answers to that. So research, listen, ask questions. Yeah, Joseph was right on the money. Ask questions then. Okay, open questions, discovery. And what do we call the process to go after a really big or a strategic deal? It was number 5. Masterclass number 5. Pursuit. Pursuit strategy.
Pursuit strategy, that was it.
Yeah, okay, pursuit strategy. And negotiating. What seat do we want to be in during a negotiation?
Pound seat.
Pound seat, that's the seat we want to be in. Okay, and what do we call maximizing sales to existing clients? It's called a share.
Can't remember.
It's a wallet?
Who said that?
Me. Wallet.
Wallet share, right on the money. Well done, Sarah. Wallet share, that's what we want. Pass with flying colours, that's fantastic. Okay, so wrapping up. Please say nice things about me. LinkedIn, Google, all welcome. Thank you very much. In fact, after this, I'll probably send you a recommendation request if that's okay. Barry's already done one, so he's ahead of the game. The next Sales Masterclass, my next one, starts on the 7th of April 2021. Please don't be shy. Referrals are very welcome, and I'll look after you, investments in relationships and all of that. That would be really good. And follow me on Eventbrite, because I'll be doing loads more stuff on. In fact, the next LinkedIn one is next Monday. If anyone's that'll be free, but it's to job seekers and students and all the rest of it. So I'd be really grateful for you if you could sort of spread the word on that, so to speak. And all that remains is just to say a really big thank you for sticking with this process. Thank you for investing with me over the last 7 weeks. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I really hope you have too. By all means, follow me on those channels that I mentioned up there. I hope you've enjoyed it too.
You said I should remind you about social media. Is this what you were referring to?
Do you know what? I can't actually remember.
Am I able to take a photograph of that, Keith, and put it on there? So thank you or not?
Thank you, Jane, for being right on the money. Okay, can I do that now? How do I do that? Right, do I extend that list? I think I do. 1 second. Can I? I know what I stopped sharing. I keep forgetting I'm only a small tile on here. By the way, is everyone okay if I do that? By the way, I ought to practice what I preach and ask permission. 1 second. Let me just go to my. Yeah, brush your hair if you need to, or whatever. Okay, right. 1 second. Okay, after 3 then. 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Okay. Yes, I think we're good to go. Thank you for that. And thanks, Dimitri, for reminding me. I appreciate it. Okay, I did promise you certificates for coming through this process. They'll be with you tomorrow morning alongside the recording link when that comes through tomorrow morning sometime. But until then, thank you so much for your time and attention. I really hope you've enjoyed it and learned something as well. That'd be really good.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, everyone.
Really nice to meet you all.
Lovely meeting you. Yeah.
Good luck with
really
everything.
Nice meeting you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.